In this video, we're going to have a look at the insider transactions important update. And more specifically, we'll go through what are important updates in the first place, how you can actually receive one, why they're so important to our process as investors, how we can actually use them, and in particular, how we can use this insider transactions update. Then I'll go over two different examples of the different outcomes where insiders are either buying shares and another example when insiders are selling shares. And lastly, I'll cover where you can go to do some more due diligence. So for starters, what are important updates? Well, it's pretty much in the name, but it's basically a brief update on an important development in the underlying business or the stock that it's about. So today we're going to be talking about insider transactions, but it could be a whole bunch of other topics like earnings reports, executives leaving the company, dividend changes, and topics like that. So how do you receive an update? Well, thankfully, it's very simple. All you have to do is add a stock to either your watch list or to your portfolio, and then it's immediately eligible to receive these important updates on. And that'll be either to your dashboard or to your inbox. So why are these so important? Well, as an investor, part of our process is to monitor stocks that we're either invested in or interested in, right? The ones that we want to buy. And so these important updates allow us to remain up to date on the fundamentals of these particular companies. So these details that are in these updates, like the insiders buying or selling shares or earnings reports and stuff, they're very important and very related to the fundamentals of the company. So these updates allow us to remain informed and up to date on them. And most importantly, probably, is it allows us to save a lot of time during this monitoring and research phase. So, for example, if we didn't have these updates, we'd have to go and try and find these insights manually by reading the company's quarterly filings or annual filings or their SEC filings or whichever jurisdiction it's in. And that can be quite time consuming to read through all the data provided and then try and come to the same sort of conclusion or insight, whereas these updates basically provide a nice condensed version of it and deliver it straight to the inbox. So in today's video, we're going to talk about the insider transactions update. Now, this one's full of data based on recent trades that have occurred from insiders in the company. So it covers the recent trade value, like how much it was for, when the trade actually took place, and it also compares it to the total amount of buyers or sells over the past 3 or 12 months. And this is to give us an idea of the kind of context of like what the kind of sentiment is around insiders and whether they've been overall buying or overall selling. So one thing to clarify first is the difference between like legal insider transactions and illegal insider trading. We're not talking about insider trading here, which is the illegal form. We're talking about insider transactions, which is the legal form, right? So there's a whole disclosure process that the insiders need to go through where they disclose their trades and like they're talking about either they give notice about the trades that they're going to do, like an intent to sell, they intend to sell in the next 90 days, or they like basically fill out a form and they say how many shares they sold and like what the price was and everything. So there's a full disclosure process, and these are the legal versions. And typically, like in America, it's to do with the Form 4, where they fill out the Form 4, gives you all the details of the trade, and just basically is following the proper disclosure requirements. Another thing to clarify is that insiders can actually be both individuals and companies. So individuals will be the likes of the people on the management team or the board members, but it also can be large shareholders. So large shareholders can be individuals as well, but large shareholders can also be companies. So when we report an insider transaction, it can be a company as well in the company report. But for these particular transactions here, we focus on individuals. And lastly, it's important to note that these particular insider transactions we're talking about here are basically all about open market transactions, right? So there's other type of transactions that can occur, be it derivative-based transactions where someone receives stock-based compensation and they sell immediately. Stuff like that is derivative-based exercises or transactions, and they're a different type of transactions, but we don't focus on them in this particular video or these particular updates. In this update, we focus on open market transactions. And why is that? Well, it's basically because these transactions are related to the person or individual's particular holding, right? So their existing holding, and it's basically they're dealing with their own money, right? Like it's not the compensation they're receiving, then they're selling it straight away, the stock straight away. It's like this is a holding that they already have, and it gives us a bit more of a better idea about like their sentiment, given they already had the stock and they've decided to either increase their position or decrease their position. So it can give us a bit more of an idea of what their sentiment is. So let's have a look at this first example where a CEO is selling stock. So we can see here on December 1st, we got the update, and this is the chairman and CEO, the same person, recently sold $285 million worth of stock. That's heaps. On November 23rd, that person sold around 893,000 shares on market at roughly $340 per share. This was the largest sale by an insider in the last 3 months. This person has been a seller over the last 12 months, reducing their personal holding by 308 million. Okay, geez, heaps to take away there. So they sold at about 340. I'm going to want to try and get more context on that. This is the largest sale. Okay, so are they the most bearish? And they've been a seller over the past 12 months, reducing their personal holding. So they've sold about, the biggest sale was recently, but they've sold an additional almost 20 million since then. So I'll show you where I can go and get more insight on these particular data points. So the first thing I would have a look at is the price history and performance, right? Just to compare it to when the trade actually took place, being November 23rd, and I got the update on December 2nd, and just try and see if there was any developments in the underlying business around that particular time that led for this insider to sell. So I'd read through these updates here. Additionally, I'd have a look at how the share price has performed after the sale, right? If this was a huge sale and it was like a big bearish signal, the market would typically react accordingly and be like, oh geez, like this chairman CEO is selling stock and offloading. We should also be worried. The next section I'd have a look at is just basically the valuation section to compare the current price versus the Simply Wall Street's estimate of fair value versus how much the insider actually sold the share for. So they made their sales at around $340 per share. It's currently trading about $310, and Simply Wall Street estimates it to be about $397. Now, of course, this is an estimate of value. It's not a buy or sell recommendation, but it's indicative of okay, does this insider believe that $340 was too expensive? That's just kind of like the insight I would try and look into here, and be like, okay, well, maybe there is actually still a bit of room. They don't believe it was expensive. They just believe it was fairly priced. And given they're an individual, they might want to just be booking some profits because maybe they have so much money exposed to this particular stock. They're just trying to manage their own personal affairs, personal financial affairs. So this isn't a huge concern to me. It doesn't tell me that the stock is considered to be incredibly overvalued. It's actually kind of reassuring, but just that's one thing I would keep in mind to look at. The next section I'll have a look at is the ownership section. And this is basically just to get an idea on this particular individual's holding and how much it was in terms of their overall holding. So we can see here that I can see the $285 million holding here, all the details of the trade and the max price they sold for. The average price was $340. And I can see the trend of overall selling from insiders. So this gives me some context of okay, are insiders generally overall selling? And so what I'd try and keep an eye out for is if there's a large trend of insiders selling or if there's a large trend of insiders buying. In the case here, it seems like there's a large trend of insider selling, but it's basically made up of this one large particular trade that happened recently in the last 3 months, because you can see it was 285 of the 315. So there's no meaningful overall trade here, given the size of the companies in the billions and billions of dollars. 49, 4.5, 4.4 here and there isn't too meaningful to me here. So the next thing I would have a look at is the management section to see how this 285 compares to that particular CEO's total holding. If it was 50% of their holding that they just sold, I'd be pretty concerned. But if it was a smaller amount, 2, 3, 4, 5%, it wouldn't be too concerning to me. Now, let's have a look at an example where a director bought stock. So we can see here this executive director recently bought $260,000 worth of stock and on the 6th of January. So they bought 172,000 shares on market at roughly $1.52 per share. In the last 3 months, there was an even bigger purchase from another insider worth $385,000. Insiders have collectively bought $5.6 million more in shares than they have sold in the last 12 months. Interesting. So that seems like a kind of bullish signal. Let's see where we can go and get some more insight on this. So again, the first section I'll have a look at is the price history and performance chart of that particular stock. Now, this is when the trade roughly took place, 6th of January. Now, I'd want to have a look at these recent developments and see if there was anything there that may have led to this kind of purchase. Interestingly, it seems like the stock has declined since this purchase, but I just want to see if there was any reason why they made the particular purchase there, if there's anything that changed in the business. Next, again, I would have a look at the business valuation on the Simply Wall Street Company report. And according to this, it believes it's considerably undervalued, fair value of about $5.16, whereas the individual bought the stock at $1.52, and it's now a bit lower at this particular time. So seems like there may still be an opportunity there. Again, not a buy or sell recommendation, just interesting to get an insight that this insider believed it was undervalued enough to warrant purchasing about 260 grand worth of stock. Now again, the next section I'd have a look at is the ownership section. So here I want to have a look at the general trend of overall buying and selling from insiders. And here it seems like there's mostly actually been insider buying over the last 12 months, but you can see here it's actually been primarily by companies, right? Companies are this sort of striped bar, whereas the individuals are the clear full chart. So this was a small purchase here, but $3.1 million worth bought in the last 3 months. But there was a huge purchase here back 3 to 6 months ago of about $1.7 billion worth from a company. So like we said, insiders can also be companies, right, if they're large shareholders. So this tells me there was a company that really wanted to increase its position about 3 to 6 months ago. That's quite an optimistic sign, right? This company believes there's a lot of potential in this particular business, or at least that's a weak signal, but that's what they're kind of getting at. So we can see that was their huge purchase there. And then next I would have a look at the list of insider transactions just to see who this particular member was, and we can see they were obviously an executive director and they're a member of the board of directors. So these are the particular purchases that have been going on recently, and it's just interesting to like compare them to see like what the overall trend is. And we can see there's typically like a trend of insiders buying, and these are all different insiders, right? And they're all buying a couple $100,000 worth here and there, and at varying different prices as well. Some like $1.80, $1.90, $1.52. They've all been increasing their position. So that was a summary of like a particular buy and a particular sell. In summary, where I would go to find more due diligence or to do more due diligence on the insider transactions important update, I would go and check out the price history and performance chart on the Simply Wall Street company report. I'd go and check out the valuation section just to see how that particular trade compares with the current price versus Simply Wall Street's estimate of fair value. And then I'd have a look at the management section just to see how much this recent trade made up of that person contributed to that person's holding. Like, did they decrease their position by 2, 3, 4%, or was it like a much bigger trade, like they offloaded half their holding, or did they increase their holding by 50%, like we saw with that particular company there. And lastly, I'd have a look at the ownership section just to see the overall buying and selling trends of insiders, and if there's anything sort of concerning. If there's only a small number of trades here and there, it's not too meaningful to me here to see that. But if there's a large trend, then yeah, that would be a bit more concerning if it's selling, and it would be a bit more reassuring if it's buying. So I hope this video has been helpful. Thank you so much for watching.